Hi, everyone. I am joined by David Jones, the author of the Guardians of Rockport book series and Abduction of Scorpion 6. And David, I'm really excited to talk to you about your books, your career, and plenty more. So thank you for taking the time to join me.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, let's start by just, you have a really impressive background and history, and I'd like to give you the floor to discuss your career and as much as you can share what life was like as a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
Sure. I did 20 years with the Air Force. I was assigned as a special agent to the OSI, or Office of Special Investigations. And if you're unfamiliar with that, as most people are, it's basically the Air Force version of NCIS. They have multiple TV shows. We had the $6 million man, but that was about 40 years ago. So basically, what OSI is we're the federal agency of the Air Force. We investigate everything from counterintelligence to felony crimes to espionage cases. Also on the UFO front, we're the investigations that did Project Blue Book in the UFO world from 1947 to the 1970s. So we were the original Men in Black because we're the ones that came up with a three-letter obscure agency in black suits and asked questions about things that went down. That was before my time, but I joined up right at the first part of the Gulf War. I did 8 deployments overseas. I did a lot of criminal investigations, but my expertise was anti-terrorism work. I was stationed on 2 different anti-terrorism teams. I was the chief of the European anti-terrorism team. I had 8 combat deployments. I was the first team leader to go into Afghanistan after 9/11. I retired from the Air Force in 2011 and became a local police officer. Ended up being the chief of police for a university police department, NCAA Division I, University of Wisconsin. I'm a volunteer firefighter now, and I retired from the police work about a year ago, and I've written a few books since then.
Yeah, no, with your books, I speak to a lot of authors who do such a, their backgrounds and their lives are such an important part of their stories. And clearly with you was such a rich background of experience through your career of serving. You really do in such an effective way incorporate your life throughout the Guardians of Rockport series. So my question is, can you speak to the way that you utilize real life experience when you're writing fiction?
Absolutely. The Rockport series is kind of loosely based off my life and my family. It's a little more exciting than real world. Obviously, it's a fiction story, but the main character is a retired OSI special agent, just like me, who served as a team leader of the anti-terrorism team, who moved to Wisconsin, became a Wisconsin police officer, and retired. And that's kind of where the story takes place a year later. It's sort of like a post-apocalypse series. The country collapses. We're amidst a war with Russia and China. We have an economic collapse, and the system falls apart for a number of reasons. So now Doug Chapman, the character in the book, his family's based off my family, but they band together with a group of volunteer firefighters, and they protect their small town of Rockport. It's a fictional town as things go bad in the world. So
What
go ahead.
so what really then, you said you're living in Wisconsin. Were you always from Wisconsin? What made you how
Yeah.
did you start to connect with the community like that?
Oh, when I was in the Air Force, I married a girl from Appleton, Wisconsin. So I told her, "You follow me for 20 years in the service, then I'll go wherever you want to go." I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, or Tempe, Arizona, but she was great. And in my book series, a lot of it focuses on the family as well. It's not, they kind of call it Jack Reacher for the Air Force. Jack Reacher is the Army version. He's a CID agent, which is also our counterpart agency. But that's more just about the action. Mine's also about the family. It's a big piece of it is my family really served along with me while I was gone. My wife was a single mother many years of the 20-year period. And so a lot of the book series is about the daughter, the son, the family, the wife, the animals. So it's
Mhm.
a family story as well as it is a post-apocalyptic action story.
Yeah, and it's I've read through the first book of your series and I absolutely loved it. And now I have to tackle the next two. So my question is like for you as an author, what is the process like to write a book series? Do you kind of, is it an evolving process? Do you know where it's going to go right away, or is it kind of always growing as you're growing as a person?
Man, I'm not a trained author. I've written thousands of police reports and counterintelligence reports over the years, but I've never written a novel before. I
Mhm.
retired. I always kind of wanted to do it. I've read a lot of novels and I'm kind of into the genre a little bit. So I wrote the first book with the intent that it could be a series. So each book kind of has an ending, but there's also a bit of a cliffhanger. So you can go to the next. So the story and the saga will continue. I I kind of planned on 5 books. I have an ending in mind already. But as I'm getting more into it, my fourth book's almost ready to go. I might extend that to more books because the
Mhm.
more I write, the more stories I come up with. And most of the stories and minor stories in the book are all based off my friends, my old partners, people I know. So almost everybody in the book is, the names might be changed, but it's somebody I served with or family member. So which makes it fun to write.
Yeah, it's always interesting like when I read books and I kind of research the author's life and you could see like a certain character might be a reflection of like someone they love or their daughter or their wife or it's always super interesting. And I think that personal connection to a story is what makes it so relevant. And I that's the I think what really makes your series so unique in a way because you have such a unique background.
Yeah, and it's fun. In the story, the main character is my age, early 50s. Uh, his daughter is a school teacher. My daughter's name is Cassie. The character she plays is Maddie. She's pregnant at the time of the first book. Then she has a granddaughter, or she has a daughter. Doug's granddaughter is Adeline, which is my granddaughter. So all my grandkids are mentioned in the book, and it kind of makes it, they're all somewhat different. It's a fiction story, but every character in the book allows me to kind of reach out and touch and remember fond things with my family members and my friends and people I've served with over the years.
Yeah, and you know, how do you manage then, it's such writing a novel is such an intensive process and it involves so much like mental and emotional effort. How do you manage writing this story for the Guardians of Rockport series while also managing other projects? Because you have another book with Abduction of Scorpion 6.
I do. I took a break. I wrote the first two Guardians, and I wrote the Abduction. Then I went back to the Guardian series. Is really kind of spinning up. The Abduction of Scorpion 6 is a great book too, but it's more localized to northern Wisconsin or UFO type people or Air Force. But the main series I have is Guardians of Rockport, but there's so many aspects because there's a DNR conservation warden, there's an Army guy, volunteer firefighters, there's doctors, medics. So almost every aspect that I've touched in my life can branch out for that series, and I have a lot more people interested in the Guardians of Rockport series. But I think Abduction and Scorpion 6, once I start advertising, will be the one to take off. I just haven't had a chance to advertise yet because I've been focusing on the Guardians of Rockport series.
Well, now there's a lot of UFO talk now, so it
There
might be
is.
it might be that book's time to shine.
It's timely. Yeah, I'm going to start once I get this next book finished, which should be a few weeks. Then I'll start pumping out more about the Abduction of Scorpion 6. And that book, it's based off a real Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the Air Force's or America's investigation into UFOs from the late 40s all the way up to the mid 1970s. And like I said, my agencies want to do that. So now that some of those records are declassified, I've actually taken a real Project Blue Book investigation from 1953 in northern Wisconsin, where a Scorpion was an Air Force fighter at the time. It was a F-89 Scorpion fighter. In 1953, one was sent to investigate a UFO over northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin area, and it goes missing. So there's a lot of talk about it being abducted. A lot of different theories on it. The Air Force, our official stance is they were, instead of UFO, turned out to be a Canadian C-47, and the pilot or fighter must have got vertigo and crashed into Lake Superior. That's the official story, but there's a lot of speculation about the UFO groups around there about that story. So my book takes place 2 years later with the same fighter squad in the same situation. And I released a lot of what was classified then, but now since it's declassified 50 years later, I put a lot of the classified things into the book, which is kind of neat. And it's a fictional story, but it's based off a real investigation, which adds a little interest to it.
That's super neat. Yeah, I love historical fiction. I'm gonna that's next one I'm gonna add to my to be read pile. And when I think about you as as an author, like you a career in the military is so like involved in it's so much like you put so much of yourself into it, and a lot of people might just want to go sit on a beach now and like you're so invested in writing. So I guess my question is, what really inspired you to pursue this entirely new career after so many years of service and so many years of hard work?
After 30 years, I've seen a lot of things, have a lot of stories to tell. A lot of it's obviously classified, so I can't share nonfiction stories. But I can put a lot of spin onto it and make them into fiction stories, which is kind of neat. And after the first one, it's turned out to be very therapeutic for me because as a military type A individual, there's things you want to say, feelings you have, but the male bravado, we just kind of, make fun of our own buddies and play practical jokes, but really have a love and affection for your partners and your family. but it's difficult to say. But I can write it in the book. I can write what Doug Chapman is thinking about his wife, his granddaughter, his partners.
Yeah.
So it's therapeutic in a way because I can talk about the feelings that I have inside. I have PTSD. Talk about a lot of the issues that I've experienced that I don't feel comfortable talking about in the book. When Doug Chapman is talking to his friends or thinking about it, I can kind of share my emotions through the characters in the book.
Yeah, that's I think super relevant and inspiring for other people who are in similar shoes because when you are anytime you're dealing with your mental health and something PTSD like you've grappled with in your own life, it could be so difficult to talk about it, and using fiction as a vessel to express those feelings is really really inspiring.
It is, and there's a lot of survivor's guilt. So I talk about that in the book. So, but everybody in the book has their own psychological aspect. Where Doug Chapman's a veteran, he's doing things, but does he leave his family to go defend the community? The book talks about a lot of ethical. As a counterintelligence officer and anti-terrorism guy, I've made a lot of ethical conundrums in my life. Do you do this? Like torture in prisoners. Obviously, it's not ethical. But what if it's that Jack Bauer 24 moment where your family's going to die and this person has information you know? So I don't really take sides in the book. And usually in the book, two different characters will debate certain ethical topics. And there's no decision, no right or wrong answer, but I let the readers decide what's the right thing. But every reader has a different take on it.
Yeah, and I think your books especially, there's a lot of people who are so invested in nonfiction and historical accounts, especially with um topics related to like United States history, United States war history. So I would really encourage a book. If there is a reader who isn't typically a fiction reader, there's so much to learn about real life through a fictional story. And I think that
Absolutely.
you get that through your
Thanks. Yeah. And I'm a big history nerd. I love it. I taught a lot of history. I used to be a college professor in addition to my other jobs. And I love the history. So all the books have historical, especially Production of Scorpion 6. You get the from World War II because the main character there is an OSI agent, but he's
mhm.
also was a World War II pilot that got injured and put in a POW camp. Then now in 1950s, he can't fly, so they put him in to be a special agent with the newly formed OSI. So you got a little bit of historical World War II. You got the Cold War. It's during pre-Vietnam era. So the first part of Vietnam happened in the late 50s, usually with French. We had people going over there. So there's a lot of historical. Abduction of Scorpion 6 is a great history book. Even though the story itself is fiction, everything around it is factual, investigated, and researched.
And obviously something like serving for decades is a life-changing experience, but I also working in this space speak to a lot of authors who feel like after writing a book they're never quite the same, and it's such a vulnerable and emotional process. So have you learned anything about yourself, anything new about yourself through writing?
I have more about my relationships with everybody, people I've talked to. Things that I put in the book are from partners or people, maybe soldiers I've lost in combat, regret, things I would have done differently, or basically when I want to talk to certain people that I'm not comfortable doing in person, I'll put that in the book. But I've reached out to so many, I've made contact with dozens of people I've served with or family members from the past or people I just knew that I kind of mentioned in the book, but I've always wanted to reach out to, hey, I love you, man, or talk to them about feelings. It's hard to talk about feelings, but with the book, I can reach out and reflect more on myself, on my bravado, my shortcomings as a man, as a person. But yeah, I get to reflect a lot more on the past and see it in the eyes of a 52 years old now. See it through my eyes versus the eyes of a 25-year-old. I've learned a lot more about life, so I can reflect on the decisions I made as a younger man
Yeah.
and things I did right or wrong. But I can reach out to people I've talked with and served with, and maybe relate to them in new ways that I wasn't emotionally able to before,
Yeah, and that
and my family as well.
it's amazing. And writing is such a great way to learn more about yourself and other people. And what when you think about yourself as an author, what if there's a takeaway you would like readers to know about who you are, what would it be?
I'm a father, a husband, a son. So much of it is wrapped into being just a soldier, an airman, or a police officer. But you're a person. That's a jockey. That's an occupation. It's part of you. But my wife served along with me all those years. Even she may not have been in the foxhole, but she was running the household while I was gone. She was my emotional rock. So the
Mhm.
biggest thing is I'm a family man. My resume is my resume, but the biggest thing in life is going to be my family.
Yeah,
And they
and
gave up a lot over 30 years while I was serving.
And I think one thing that I, as a reader or any content I consume, books, music, like I seek authenticity, and clearly authenticity just deeply ingrained in your work, and that's something that I
Thanks.
really enjoyed about it. And I definitely think that it speaks to the value of like how you write and how you think, and it's certainly makes your books like in my mind every fiction reader's got to dive into them because I they're so real.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I want to thank you for your time, and I want to wrap up with just, you mentioned you're always writing, you're a
Yeah.
busy guy. So are there any other, like, fill us in on the projects in the works, books in the
Uh,
work?
Book 4 in the Guardians of Rockport series is in the editing stage right now. It should be out, well, hopefully in about 2 months once it goes through the process, 2 to 3 months, but it's just about done. And it's a continuation. If you like the first three, you'll love the fourth.
Awesome. Well, I will encourage readers to go check out your work. David Jones, you have a website, right?
Yep,
It's
it's davideldonjones.com. DAVIDELDONJONES.com.
perfect. Check
And
it
then there
out.
you can see you see a little bit about me, about the author. I have kind of a photographs from my career, the career that inspired the books. So,
Amazing. And I will, in the video here, in the video and in like the blog write up, I'll make sure I plug all of those links in
yeah, I appreciate it.
where
Yeah.
everyone could purchase your book. So, check out his work. David's an awesome guy. His books are great. I love them. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.